It's time right now here on Prophecy Today for us to take a look at the book. The Prophecy Today weekend broadcast each week endeavors to bring you information from our broadcast partners that gives us further insight into the current events in our world and how they fit into the prophetic scenario for the last days that can be found in Bible prophecy. This week, we had a conversation with Bob McGinnis. He's our man out of Washington, D.C., a consultant at the Pentagon, and we talked about the geopolitical activities unfolding. What about the elections in Tunisia? How is that going to play into what's happening in the Middle Eastern world? And what about the chemical weapons, the other weapons in Libya? We were looking at that. A Saudi cleric saying he's going to give $100,000 to anybody who kidnaps an Israeli Defense Force soldier. Looking at these events and seeing how they fit into Bible prophecy, every single one of them play into a scenario found in God's Word. Our Middle East news update, we went to Shiloh. It's the center part of the state of Israel. It has a great historic and biblical history. That's where the Ark of the Covenant rested for over 350 years, where the nation of Israel was established when they came into the Promised Land. And Winky Madad talked about what's unfolding in Israel as it relates to everything happening in our world. Dr. Rob Congdon, we had a report on the summit of the member states of the European Union and how they're going to try to deal with the euro. And is it going to fall? The Eurozone, can it be rescued? China wants to get involved. Dr. Rob Congdon keeps us posted on all the activities from the European Union, which every time we talk together, we say these events are setting the stage for Bible prophecy to be fulfilled for the revived Roman Empire to come into existence. We had two broadcast partners, Brannon House and Tom McMahon, that really gave us information to help us understand how Christians should be living in these days. These are troubled times, and how do we live in the last days? By the way, all of these interviews are on our website at Prophecy Today Radio Network. You can go there and listen, and by the way, tell a friend that they ought to hear these conversations as well. That's Prophecy Today Radio Network at prophecytoday.com. In my conversation with Tom McMahon, we discussed Halloween and why it is wrong for the Christians to be involved in this so-called holiday. And with Brandon House, we discussed a worldview. What is it? And how do we develop a worldview? You know, all of us have a worldview. That's what we think about what's happening in our world. And then how do we assimilate, why is this happening? The proper worldview will be a biblical, prophetic worldview, something that you can glean from your study of God's Word, but the prophetic scenario found in His Word as well. We are certainly involved in times when things are unfolding in this world that make us question, why is it happening, and how does this all come together, and how does it fit into the future? Well, that's what Bible prophecy helps us to glean a better understanding. And the book of Revelation is the master plan. All that is laid out for the future is found in the book of Revelation. Let me just quickly go through the book of Revelation in a couple of minutes here. I'm going to give you some information that will help you study the book of Revelation. You need to study it. And let me remind you, you do not study it numerically. You study it chronologically. I have a brand new book entitled Revelation, a Chronology. This would be a must book to read as far as your study, I believe, of the book of Revelation. It lays out how everything unfolds. Let me just talk you through the book of Revelation here for a moment. We want to know what's going to happen in the past, and that would be Revelation chapters 1, 2, and 3. Chapter 1 shows us the person, the power, and the program of Jesus Christ. There in chapter 1 we see what he looks like in his resurrected, glorified body. That's his person. Then his power. In verse 18 he says, I am he that was alive, dead, now stand before you alive. That's the power of Christ, the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Then in verse 19 of chapter 1 he says, hey, write down those things which were. That would be chapter 1 of Revelation. Those things which are, chapters 2 and 3. And those things which shall happen hereafter, that's chapters 4 through 22. the program that is going to happen in the future according to God's plan and what will happen. Remember, chapters 2 and 3 now are the church age, letters to 7 churches, but they lay out also periods of church history. Verse 1 of chapter 4 says, "And after this, after the church age, the rapture. He says, I heard as it were a trumpet talking with me, which said, Come up hither." That depicts the rapture. Then he says in verse 1 of chapter 4, "And I will now tell you what's going to happen from here on, after the rapture." Chapters 4:2 through 19:10, that's 16 chapters, detailed information about the 7-year tribulation period. All that will unfold in that 7 years, and it is packed full of details. Chapter 19:11 records the return of Jesus Christ. He gets on a white horse. We join him, chapter 19, verse 14, on white horses, and we come back to the earth, to the Mount of Olives, in the city of Jerusalem. Revelation chapter 20, verses 1 through 6 talks about the 1,000-year period of time. First 3 verses talk about Satan being bound in the bottomless pit for 1,000 years, and then verses 4, 5, and 6, the kingdom period, a 1,000-year period when we rule and reign with Jesus Christ here on this earth. Terrible time of judgment, the great white throne judgment, that's revealed to us in chapter 20, verses 11 to 15. And then chapters 21 and 22, eternity future. What's going to happen? The new heavens, the new earth, the new Jerusalem. Wow, this is an important study. You need to study through the book of Revelation. Do it chronologically. That's the way you'll be able to understand it and get a copy of my book, Revelation, a Chronology. By the way, notice the 16 chapters of the tribulation. Chapter 6, verses 1 and 2, the Antichrist. Chapter 6, verses 3 and 4, the alignment of the nations. Chapter 11, verse 1, it talks about the temple. And chapter 18, Babylon. By the way, these things are all happening as we think about it. The Antichrist is about to appear. The nations are aligning themselves against Israel. The Israelis are ready to put up a temple on the Temple Mount. And Babylon, modern-day Iraq, has been our focus for a number of years. These prophecies are all ready to be fulfilled. But let me remind you, before all of these prophecies are fulfilled, the rapture of the church, chapter 4, verse 1, book of Revelation. Heard as it were a trumpet talking with me, which said, Come up hither. We're just about to hear that trumpet sound. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 says, Jesus will shout, the archangel will shout, the trumpet of God will sound, and we'll be caught up to be with him. Everything we've talked about on this broadcast today gives us evidence that rapture is about to happen. And basically, having said that, there's nothing left for me to say, except let's keep looking up until...